A young student, Tsubaki Eiga, sits alone on a bench, a water bottle in hand. His thoughts are consumed by a girl with bright, smiling eyes, Himawari. He admits to himself a simple, overwhelming truth. He is head over heels for her. But the object of his affection, Himawari, sits smiling beside another boy, Odokun, who leans back with casual confidence. The reality of the situation is plain. She is head over heels for that guy. That's all there is to it. The school bell chimes as the clock strikes noon, signaling the beginning of the lunch break. In the hallway, Himawari dashes ahead, cheerfully calling for Tsubaki to hurry up. He follows, reflecting that even in their third year of middle school, it's not common for boys and girls to eat lunch together. Himawari notices his hesitation and asks if he's feeling shy. She dismisses his concern with a radiant, reassuring smile. It's just fine, she insists, because their bond is special, extra special. After all, they're childhood friends. Her words lead them to a familiar bench outside. Let's sit down, she suggests with a giggle. Tsubaki, feigning reluctance, agrees, saying he supposes he has no choice. He takes a seat, leaving a small space between them. Every single lunch break, he goes through this routine, pretending to merely go along with her whims. But in truth, he secretly longs for this moment each day. As she opens her lunchbox, exclaiming how tasty it looks, he watches her, captivated. To him, she shines like no other, her entire being bathed in the warm sunlight. She offers him a piece of food, and in that moment, he reaffirms his own identity in his mind. Tsubaki Eiga. The pleasant atmosphere shatters when Himawari suddenly declares that Odokun is the worst. Tsubaki looks at her, confused by the abrupt change in topic. She reminds him of a promise they had made to always stick together for lunch and on the way home. Her frustration pours out. She explains that lately, Odokun dashes off whenever someone else calls him, and that today, he didn't even show up for lunch at all. Her voice trembles as she questions how he could do such a thing, especially when they're supposed to be childhood friends. Her surprise was interrupted by the arrival of another boy, who apologized profusely. As he introduced himself as Hinata Sakura, Himawari's face lit up, initially mistaking him for Odokun before correcting herself, relieved that he had come after all. He explained to Tsubaki that he knew he'd find a way to slip away, admitting that lunchtime just didn't feel right without the three of them together. It was the only way he could truly relax. As an apology for his tardiness, he presented them with a small gift. Now seated on a bench together, Himawari leaned forward eagerly, asking what it was. He revealed a large, round bread, declaring that when it came to their trio, it had to be a sunshine bun. Beaming, he held it up for both to see, announcing his plan for a perfect three-way split. Himawari's eyes widened with delight. He carefully tore off a piece, offering the first portion to Himawari. She accepted it with a bright smile, thanking him enthusiastically before taking a bite. She then passed a piece on to Tsubaki with her thanks. Holding a share, Tsubaki watched his friend, thinking to himself that Sakura was the absolute master of splitting things three ways. Sakura, however, just shrugged it off, claiming he was simply going with the flow. His thoughts continued, noting how Sakura always casually handed the sunflower, the best part, to Himawari. She clutched her piece of bread, a faint blush warming her cheeks. As he ate, Sakura mentioned another childhood friend who was very special to him, someone named Sakura. Himawari turned to him, listening intently. He hesitantly turned to Tsubaki, asking if he could have a word in private. Tsubaki, seated beside him on the bench, readily agreed. Tsubaki listened as he explained the source of his trouble. Every lunch break, he was swarmed with invitations from students all over, so much so that he felt like he was being abducted each day. He even recalled Himawari's gentle resignation, noting that if it was Oda inviting him, she supposed it couldn't be helped. The reason for all this attention was a case of mistaken identity. The person everyone was so eager to befriend was Sakura, a superstar at the school who excelled in both sports and academics, consistently ranking first in tests. But his true desire was far simpler. He confessed with a strained expression that despite all the attention, he just wanted to enjoy the day and hang out with the three of them. Sitting again with Tsubaki, he expressed his feelings of inadequacy, sighing that Sakura was a genuinely great person and that he felt he couldn't compete. He asked Tsubaki for advice, acknowledging that simply rejecting all the invitations wasn't a good solution. His friend considered the dilemma carefully, his hand to his chin. Tsubaki concluded that they would have to devise an alternative plan. An idea then formed. He suggested that since lunch was impossible, perhaps Sakura could hang out with them after school instead. The simple logic of the proposal resonated with Sakura. With a solution in hand, his expression brightened as he happily relayed the plan to Himawari, who listened with a faint blush on her cheeks. From a short distance, Tsubaki observed their interaction, his gaze steady as a hopeful light shone in Himawari's eyes. He reflected that while the plan meant they wouldn't be able to go home together, he was determined to seize this opportunity. The three of them stood together near a park bench, the arrangement now set. As they sat, Hinata confirmed his part, declaring that he would entrust the journey home to Tsubaki and Himawari. Tsubaki turned to him, his expression filled with surprise, and asked if he was truly all right with this, wondering aloud what other option there could be. Hinata's attention, however, shifted to Himawari. His heart fluttered as he asked if she felt safe with him, and a flustered Himawari quickly affirmed that she did. Her cheeks flushed as she gave her wholehearted approval, exclaiming that there was no doubt in her mind and that they should proceed with the plan. Tsubaki averted his gaze, a faint blush coloring his own cheeks as he internally marveled at the unexpected turn of events. Just then, their moment was interrupted by the arrival of two other students. The boy leading them called out, announcing he'd finally tracked Sakura down after he vanished at the start of lunch. The newcomer apologized for his forwardness, explaining it was a long-standing habit. He clarified that their only intention was to spend time with Sakura. In response, Hinata proposed a new plan, a group trip to a karaoke parlor after school. The suggestion was met with instant and explosive excitement from his friends, who all shouted their agreement. As the group walked off, the brown-haired friend playfully teased Hinata about his singing. Undeterred, Hinata smiled to himself, filled with a confident resolve to captivate everyone with his song. As the others depart, Himawari turns to Tsubaki, remarking that Odokun really shines in these moments. She fondly recalls that back in the day, he was the tiniest and shyest one among them. Her gaze lingers on the departing group, where Sakura Hinata seems to be monopolizing her attention as he walks off with his friends. Tsubaki, however, feels a quiet sense of victory. He thinks to himself that on the way home today, it's finally his turn. A happy, determined expression crosses his face. Now walking alone with Himawari, he seizes the opportunity, nervously starting to bring up a topic concerning her. His words cause a blush to spread across Himawari's face. She looks away, flustered, as Tsubaki observes her with a gentle smile. He clarifies his point as they continue their walk, explaining that Sakura truly treasures the time the three of them spend together as a trio. The statement seems to catch Himawari by surprise. Her surprise gives way to understanding as she exclaims that he's right. Building on the moment, Tsubaki suggests that next time they should bring something they can all share, a thoughtful idea that clearly impresses her. As they arrive near her home, Tsubaki bids her farewell. But before he can leave, Himawari suddenly reaches out and takes his hand, stopping him in his tracks with a questioning look. She then breaks into a radiant, heartfelt smile, thanking him for the day, just as she always does. After she lets go, he stares at his own palm, a familiar, unsettling sensation washing over him. He mutters in frustration, "Oh, not again." He stands frozen as Himawari looks at him with a gentle smile and confesses that she really likes him. A deep blush spreads across his face, his eyes wide with shock as he stammers, unable to form a coherent response. Overwhelmed, he suddenly turns and runs, shouting an apology to a bewildered Himawari. As he flees the school building, his mind races with panic. This is no good at all, and he must find a way out of this mess. His face is a mask of anguish and regret. He can't believe he allowed a moment of weakness to risk losing something so precious to him. The feeling is overwhelming, as if he is standing on the very brink of total chaos. He sits alone in a starkly lit space, letting out a heavy sigh. The question hangs in the air. What should he do now? The truth settles in his mind with a heavy finality. He admits to himself that he's known this all along, having figured it out ages ago. Yet, he has been stubbornly clinging to the past. Clutching the fabric over his heart, he makes a firm resolution. He cannot become that kind of person, and for that reason, he will not let this happen again. His resolve hardens as he sits on the floor of a quiet room. He knows what he must do. He has to bring those two together. His expression is grim, his gaze fixed and unwavering. He is certain that there is no other way. Sitting alone on the floor, Sabeki Eiga comes to a firm decision. He resolves that he must bring the two of them together. His expression hardens, his gaze intense. He is utterly convinced that there is no other way to proceed. The next day at school, as birds chirp outside, he spots Himawari walking down the corridor. She notices him at the same moment. She runs up to him with a cheerful, "Good morning," remarking that it's unusual for him to wait for her. She eagerly asks what he wants to say. He stands before her and states his wish plainly. He wants his two most precious people to be happy. His words catch her completely by surprise. Flustered, she stammers his name, asking what on earth he's talking about. She struggles to compose herself, her face flushing a deep red as she tries to process his statement. He simply watches her reaction. Her mind races with a sudden, hopeful possibility. Could it be that he's figured out her feelings? He confirms her unspoken thought with a simple, "Yeah." He then clarifies his meaning, asking her directly if she likes Sakura as more than just a friend. Overwhelmed, she lets out a nervous laugh and a flustered denial. He looks at her with a gentle, knowing smile, beginning to speak her name once more. He confirms her fears, stating that he's been watching all this time, and of course he'd notice. Himawari flinches, letting out a small gasp of distress. He begins to explain, recalling a memory of their childhood. Back then, he notes, Sakura was the smallest of them all and wasn't particularly skilled at studying or sports. But as he continues, Sakura knew he couldn't remain that way and began to try with all his might. Little by little, through sheer effort, Sakura grew into a truly admirable person. His words strike a chord with Himawari. With a blush, she concedes that he's amazing for seeing right through her. As she speaks, a fond memory of a young, beaming Sakura surfaces in her mind. She turns away slightly, her blush deepening as she quietly accepts the truth of her feelings. Finding her resolve, Himawari clenches her fists and agrees to confess. She feels she can say it, especially to him. Tsubaki calmly affirms her decision. With a surge of courage, she shuts her eyes and shouts her long-held secret. She has always liked Odokun. He listens to her confession, a gentle and understanding smile gracing his lips as he simply acknowledges her words. His calm acceptance allows her a moment of release. Tears of relief stream down her face as she thanks him for listening to her feelings. He looks at her with renewed purpose, clenching his fist. He swears to her that he will make her feelings a reality. He was standing in the school hallway with his friends when a female student called out his name. She then shyly asked if Sakura was present. In response to the girl's query, Sakura turned to face Tsubaki with a bright smile, remarking that it was rare for him to visit their classroom. Tsubaki replied that he was just there for a small matter. He elaborated on his reason for being there, his expression turning serious. He explained that he had gotten permission to have lunch with Sakura, just the two of them, because he wanted to talk man-to-man. Sakura, taken aback, questioned what would happen with Himawari. A short while later, the two sat on separate benches in the school courtyard, a quiet distance between them as the clock on the building marked the lunch hour. Sakura broke the silence, admitting it had been a while since they'd spent an afternoon together like this. He then got to the point, asking what exactly Tsubaki meant by a man-to-man talk, and adding that there was something he'd been wanting to ask as well. Tsubaki turned to face Sakura directly, ready to broach the sensitive topic he had brought them here to discuss. The directness of Tsubaki's inquiry left Sakura utterly stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief. Tsubaki had bluntly asked if Sakura was actually popular and, more importantly, if he was interested in Himawari, offering his help if he was. A flustered Sakura immediately insisted that was never going to happen, demanding to know why Tsubaki would even think that. He pressed further, wondering why Tsubaki would suddenly ask such a thing, and also brought up Uda's name in his confusion. Tsubaki, averting his gaze, simply claimed that he was just curious, but his true thoughts revealed a different motive. He believed that if Sakura had a girlfriend, it would make things a lot easier for him. His suggestion leaves Sakura speechless, a faint blush coloring his cheeks as he processes the unexpected question. Finding his voice, Sakura protests that Tsubaki is saying something awful. He insists that he has no intention of getting a girlfriend, declaring that the time the three of them spend together is what matters most. Tsubaki presses the point, leaning in so close that Sakura recoils. He asks what would happen if it didn't cause any trouble. Would he consider it then? Tsubaki promises to figure that part out himself before waving goodbye and departing. The intense exchange leaves Sakura alone on the bench, deeply unsettled. He thinks to himself that if Tsubaki, of all people, is pushing him like this, then perhaps he has to give it some thought. As leaves rustle in the wind, his thoughts drift to his own feelings, now thrown into confusion. Elsewhere, the idea begins to spread. A voice wonders aloud what would happen if Sakura started dating someone. The question echoes through the school halls as Tsubaki runs past a group of girls. One admits she might get a little jealous, but another reminds her that Sakura is basically everyone's idol. The rumor follows him into the city at night. A different group of friends discusses it, concluding that it can't be helped, so long as he still hangs out with them like always. In a cafe, a few boys consider the possibility. One enthusiastically states they'd be all for it, while his friend jokes that if they aren't careful, every girl might end up falling for Sakura. Finally, Tsubaki's journey ends as he is stopped by Odokun. Cutting through the ambiguity, Oda directly confronts him, demanding to know what exactly he is trying to do. He continues his confrontation, pointing out to Tsubaki that everyone had simply dismissed him as a gloomy guy who was childhood friends with Sakura. Yet, despite that perception, he was now meddling in their affairs. Tsubaki quietly concedes the point. The scene shifts to a quiet street at night, where Tsubaki's thoughts echo his simple, underlying desire. He just wants to make his wish come true. Later, in a park, Oda lets out an exasperated sigh, running a hand through his hair in frustration. He sits across from Tsubaki on some playground equipment, expressing his disbelief that Tsubaki actually went and discussed the matter with all of his friends. Leaning forward, Oda asks if Tsubaki is truly serious about his actions. Tsubaki looks back at him, confirming that Oda must have also noticed Himawari's feelings. With a quiet intensity, Tsubaki states his purpose plainly. He just wants the two of them, Oda and Himawari, to be together. Oda's eyes widen at the confession, while Tsubaki's hands clench tightly, a subtle sign of the turmoil beneath his calm facade. Stunned, Oda questions if Tsubaki is truly okay with that outcome. Tsubaki stammers that of course he is, but his explanation is cut short as Oda suddenly grabs him by the shirt. Tsubaki erupts, shouting and demanding to know what's wrong with the two childhood friends he loves most becoming a couple. Internally, however, a frantic thought surfaces, why am I grabbing him? Why? Oda can only stare, shocked and bewildered by the violent contradiction in Tsubaki's words and actions, as Tsubaki insists that nothing would make him happier. He tries to reason with his friend, his hand trembling as he speaks. He insists that he wants the three of them to keep spending time together, if that is truly Tsubaki's wish. In response, Tsubaki tightens his grip, his expression filled with anguish. He shouts that even so, he has no plans to stop their time as a trio, a clear contradiction to his previous demands. His outburst fades as he struggles to regain his composure, muttering for himself to calm down. He acknowledges Oda's feelings, his voice trailing off as he looks away. Seeing his friend's turmoil, Oda pleads with him to face Himawari's feelings directly. Tsubaki violently rejects this, roaring that it has nothing to do with him. The anger drains from his face, replaced by a look of profound vulnerability. With tears in his eyes, he confesses that Oda is the only one he can entrust this to. The confrontation subsides, and the two sit together. Tsubaki leans against his friend, admitting his own weakness and insisting that it must be Oda. After a heavy silence, Oda quietly agrees. He then looks up, his expression resolute. He declares that if the person he trusts most in the world is asking this of him, he will do as Tsubaki says. With the matter settled for now, Tsubaki suggests they address it the next day. He watches as Oda walks away alone under the darkening sky. The following day at school, Tsubaki stands with Himawari. She is visibly distressed, her hands clasped nervously as she stammers that she knew someone like her would be inadequate. He calmly reassures her, insisting that everything will be fine and encouraging her to proceed. Nearby, Oda waits on a bench. Himawari looks towards him, still uncertain, but seems to take Tsubaki's words to heart. She steels herself, hands clasped tightly before her chest. After a moment of silent resolve, she affirms to herself that she is ready. With her decision made, she turns and walks toward Oda, who waits for her a short distance away. Her long hair conceals her expression as she closes the gap between them. Her face then erupts in a bright, blushing smile. Looking directly at him, she earnestly confesses that she truly likes him, thanking him for listening. From afar, Tsubaki watches the entire exchange. His own expression is somber, his eyes reflecting a quiet melancholy as he observes the pivotal moment he helped create. The confession hangs in the air, a significant event against the mundane backdrop of the school building. Tsubaki's mind replays the scene, Himawari walking away from Oda, who remains standing near a set of stairs. He recalls the details vividly, remembering how Himawari's entire face had flushed a brilliant red from the neck up. Even from his vantage point, it was obvious that she had confessed with every fiber of her being. He then thinks of Oda, whose expression was more serious than Tsubaki had ever seen it in all their years of friendship. And with that gravity, he had accepted her feelings. And then, after that moment, everything changed. He remembered the moment it all went wrong. The sight of Himawari and Oda wrapped in a tight embrace. They stood close together by a park bench, oblivious to anything else around them. From a distance, he had witnessed every single bit of it. The painful scene seared into his memory. The memory tormented him later that night. He collapsed onto his bed, still in his school uniform, letting out a pained groan. Tears streamed down his face as he buried it in his arms, trying to convince himself that if Himawari was happy, then that alone was enough. He clung to the desperate thought, forcing the words into his mind. It's fine. The insistent buzzing of an alarm clock pulled him back to consciousness. He sat up, having somehow managed to get some sleep, and reflected with a weary sigh that no matter how many times he experienced this, he could never get used to it. With a sense of grim determination, he reached for his phone, telling himself that this time, for sure, things would be different. His finger hovered over the screen. It displayed the date, May 7th, 7 a.m., set against a wallpaper of a cherished childhood photo of him, Himawari, and Oda at a festival. The numbers and date glowed, a stark confirmation of the day he was being forced to relive. He grits his teeth in anguish, the realization crashing down on him. This marks the 12th time he has lived through this day. Overwhelmed by despair, he slams his fist down, the impact echoing his desperate plea. He questions how many more times he must endure this torment, begging for it to finally end in the way he desires. His thoughts spiral as he stares at his phone. The screen confirms his nightmare. May 7th, 7 a.m. He realizes with dawning horror that this loop, this endless repetition of the same morning, has consumed his entire past week. The day begins under a bright, cloud-filled sky, with sunlight glinting through the haze. Inside a classroom, a teacher announces the end of the holidays and reminds her students of the upcoming midterm exams, urging them to keep studying. Outside, students, including Tsubaki Eiga, make their way onto the school grounds. The teacher begins taking attendance, calling out for Aga-san. She notes that on this day, May 7th, Kiyakawa and Mizui are on cleaning duty before moving on to the next name, Ida-san. He sits alone at his desk, head propped on his hand, and quietly confirms his presence. His mind begins to drift. He, Tsubaki Eiga, is trapped, forced to experience a time loop that repeats the days from May 5th to May 13th. The crushing weight of this reality settles upon him. He has lived this again and again. Staring out the classroom window, he is lost in thought, wondering why he's trapped in this loop and what its cause could possibly be. This feeling of helplessness follows him outside. As other students play on the field, he stands apart, consumed by the fact that he has no idea how to escape. The school bell chimes, marking the passage of time within another identical day. He sits in class, his expression weary and resigned. As he continues to stare out the window, Himawari's voice cuts through his thoughts, calling for Tsukun to hurry. But he remains lost, pondering the confusion he's felt since the very first loop. He barely registered Himawari's words as she held his hand, trying to reassure him. She reminded him that they were third-year middle school students now, and it was perfectly normal for boys and girls to eat lunch together, asking if he was simply feeling shy. He walked on, a cynical smile touching his lips. It wasn't shyness that held him back. The truth was far more isolating. He was simply reliving the same days, again and again. Later, they sat on a park bench, a noticeable distance between them. While he stared blankly into his bag, Himawari watched him, a cheerful and hopeful expression on her face. His mind raced, consumed by the loop. He reasoned that there must be a trigger, something he could use to break the cycle. He had already tried so many things. As he pondered this, Himawari's voice, soft and concerned, cut through his thoughts, calling his name. Startled from his thoughts, he looked up to find her face just inches from his own, her expression one of intense focus. A blush crept up his neck as he flinched back in surprise. She pulled back slightly, asking what was wrong and noting how lost in thought he seemed. Flustered, he stammered that it was nothing, merely that he was wondering why Odokun hadn't arrived yet. She settled back onto the bench, her gaze still questioning as she asked if that was truly the only reason. He insisted it was, assuring her he wasn't lying. Her expression softened with genuine concern. She told him that if something was troubling him, she was ready to listen. She couldn't bear to see him in distress. He looked at her, his hand tightening into a fist as he began to thank her, though his words trailed off with hesitation. The moment was broken by the sudden arrival of Odokun, who draped his arms over their shoulders. He cheerfully asked what was happening, commenting on the strange atmosphere between them. Himawari, caught off guard, stammered his name. Odokun then turned his attention to Tsubaki, questioning how he knew that he had already bought a sun-shaped bread. Tsubaki offered only a faint, knowing smile in response, leaving his friend bewildered. He sits on the bench, his back to his friends, as Odokun explains to a seated Himawari that Tsubaki has likely memorized all of his habits. Himawari chimes in, noting that she has also memorized what Odokun does. Her attention then shifts to Tsubaki. With a slight blush, she earnestly tells him that she's memorized his habits too, how he always makes an effort to meet them there, even when he's running late, and how he always buys sunflower bread for the three of them to share. She continues with a smile, adding that upon his arrival, he always apologizes and suggests they split the bread 3 ways, just as they always do. Her words are cut short, as Tsubaki abruptly rises from the bench. With his back still turned to them, he speaks in a low voice, telling them that today, they should just share the bread between the two of them. Without another word, he begins to walk away. A stunned Himawari calls out his name, her voice filled with confusion. As he continues to walk, Odokun jumps to his feet, demanding to know where he is going. Tsubaki simply apologizes over his shoulder, stating that he has an errand to run. His dismissive reply leaves both Himawari and Odokun staring after him, their expressions a mixture of shock and deep concern, while his own face remains a mask of grim resolve. They can only watch as his solitary figure recedes, heading back toward the school building alone. A profound weariness settles over him. He feels tired of it all. He has lost count of the number of times he has searched for an escape from the loop, having tried every possible solution. The memory of a painful choice surfaces, the decision to push his 2 friends together, despite the hurt it caused him. But even that changed nothing. He knelt in darkness, phone lying beside him, consumed by a single, agonizing thought. If the loop was destined to repeat no matter what, then his efforts only deepened his own suffering. He came to a bleak conclusion, standing alone in the void. It would be better to do nothing at all. The next day at school, a teacher handed back test results with a flourish. He praised Tsubaki for his excellent work, telling him to keep it up as Himawari and Odokun sat in the background. He glanced at the perfect score of 100, a familiar sight. Of course it was perfect. It was the 13th time he had taken this exact test, his face devoid of any satisfaction. He slid the classroom door open and walked out into the empty hall. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Himawari and Odokun were locked in a tense standoff, glaring at each other with unconcealed frustration. As he rounded a corner, he stopped short, surprised to find them there, arguing. From his perspective, he could see Himawari's flushed face as she confronted Odokun, demanding to know why he wouldn't just admit himself. Odokun shot back, flustered and defensive. He yelled that it was easy for her to talk, insisting that he didn't know anything and that this was all her fault. He reminded her that he'd been saying all along that he wasn't the one in the wrong. Unable to stand by, Tsubaki stepped forward, raising a hand to interrupt. He called out, asking what was going on and why the 2 of them were fighting, drawing their surprised attention. He stands frozen as Himawari, flustered, turns and points directly at him, shouting that this is all his fault. Her accusation sends Odokun into a rage. He shouts that her behavior is clearly because of Tsubaki, leaving Himawari stunned by his vehemence. He tries to make sense of the escalating argument, wondering how things got so complicated. He questions if it was his fault for joining them for lunch, especially after he tried to give them space earlier, assuming they had personal matters to attend to. Odokun, running a hand through his hair in frustration, tries to reassure him. He insists that Tsubaki would never abandon their time together, unless it was for something truly important. The pieces start to click into place for him. He deduces that the real issue must be between his 2 friends, specifically wondering aloud if the problem is because of Himawari. His question hangs in the air as Himawari and Odokun face each other, the tension between them palpable. He watches them, a bead of sweat forming on his brow as he feels the weight of their conflict. The realization hits him. They're truly fighting because of him. In an attempt to defuse the situation, he tells them both to calm down and then turns to walk away, believing his absence will end their argument. He internally concludes that Odokun was the one who started it all. His departure only fuels the fire. Odokun shouts after him, accusing him of selfishly inserting himself into their lives only to leave when it suits him. Himawari, her voice filled with concern, calls out as well, asking if he's been feeling lonely lately because he's been so busy. Their words stop him in his tracks. He whirls around, his patience finally snapping, and implores them to just listen to him for once. He reflects with a somber expression, concluding that if his earlier behavior was wrong, then he is the one who deserves the blame. He then bows deeply before Himawari and Odokun, formally apologizing and stating that it's because of him that the two of them are fighting like this. His apology leaves Odokun flustered and at a loss for words. Still bowing, Tsubaki pleads with them to listen, now that he has apologized. Hearing this, Himawari tells Odokun that since Tsubaki has gone this far, it's time for them to stand down. However, she winks and warns Odokun not to assume everything is resolved, declaring she won't forgive him until he apologizes to her properly. Odokun reacts with visible annoyance, crossing his arms. With the immediate conflict paused, Himawari and Odokun turn their backs on each other and storm off in opposite directions, leaving Tsubaki standing alone in the middle of the hallway. He lets out a sigh, surprised at himself. As he turns, he notices a group of classmates who witnessed the event. One asks if they should report it to a teacher, but another reassures her that it seems resolved and the two will make up soon. His thoughts drift as he looks out the window, hoping that they were just being emotional and will be back to normal by the time they go home. As time passes, a silent apology to Tsuken hangs in the air, a lingering thought from one of the departed friends. Later, by the lockers, Himawari is on the phone while Tsubaki stands nearby. She firmly states that she won't walk home with Odokun until all their issues are settled. Meanwhile, Odokun is approached by two other friends who invite him to walk home with them. He declines, saying he's sorry, but he won't forgive Himawari until she admits she was wrong. After the confrontation, Tsubaki Eiga walks alone through the school grounds, leaving a hunched, defeated version of himself behind. He sighs, the weight of the day's events pressing down on him. He clenches his fist, his gaze downcast, as a single thought consumes him. Why did things have to turn out this way? His mind drifts back to a simpler time, a memory of when his group of friends was always together. He recalls how they had never once fought with each other. The pleasant memory is soured by the present reality. He believes it was his own behavior that caused them to become like this, shattering their peaceful dynamic. Crouched on the ground, he squeezes his eyes shut. He never wanted to feel this kind of pain again, yet he feels powerless to change anything. As he wallows in his thoughts, a cheerful voice calls out from behind a corner, addressing him by a nickname. Hey, you're Agakon, right? Tsubaki looks up, startled. Before he can process the question, the girl leaps over the nearby fence with surprising athleticism, landing directly in his line of sight. His eyes widen in shock. Standing before him, she smiles knowingly. She confirms that he is indeed Agakun, the childhood friend of Tsurugi and Chisato. She then mentions that she saw the two people who were fighting during lunch, and Tsubaki admits that he was involved. She taps her temple thoughtfully, a curious expression on her face. She then asks him a direct question. Aren't those two supposed to be a couple? Her unexpected question leaves him utterly stunned and speechless. He stands frozen by her question. The girl leans in closer, a knowing smile on her face, and adds to his confusion by asking if he wasn't the one who tried to set them up in the first place. Her words strike him with the force of a physical blow. His mind goes blank, his eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. As he stares at her confident expression, a torrent of questions floods his mind. Who is this girl? How could she possibly know about events that happened before the loop? A new love story begins to unfold between three childhood friends. But a question hangs in the air. Who is this girl who has suddenly appeared before Tsubaki Eiga? She rests her chin on her hand, a confident, knowing smirk on her face, while he sits beside her, looking slightly troubled. She sits alone at a table in a cafe at night, happily humming to herself as she sips her drink through a straw. Turning her attention to Tsubaki, she questions him directly. She asks if he wasn't the one who tried to set up his two friends, wondering aloud why they aren't a couple yet. Tsubaki looks away, unable to meet her gaze. The two sit across from one another at the table. She continues her probing, musing if this girl, referring to herself, might have the same condition that he does. The suggestion catches Tsubaki completely off guard. She leans forward, her expression becoming playfully flirtatious. She tells him that when he stares at her so seriously, it makes her feel shy. Her forwardness makes him recoil in his seat, flustered. He throws his hands up defensively, stammering a denial. He turns his head away, still blushing and trying to regain his composure. Across from him, she simply smirks, clearly enjoying his reaction. Finally turning back to face her, Tsubaki asks the question directly. Who is she? He shakes his head slightly, admitting that he doesn't recognize her at all. In response, she brings a finger to her lip in a thoughtful, yet teasing pose. She wonders aloud if perhaps she was being a little too overconfident. She offers a soft apology, explaining that she hardly knows any of the other students outside of her own class. Stirring her drink, she then suggests that, in that case, they should get to know each other better from now on. She leaned forward with a playful wink, introducing herself as Weshiki from Class 3B. She hummed a little tune, telling Agakun to be sure and remember her name. The two of them sat across from each other at a table, a moment of silence hanging between them as Tsubaki processed her forward introduction. He mulled over her words. Class 3B. That meant she was in the same class as Himawari. The connection clicked in his mind. That must be how she knew about him. As he put the pieces together, she watched him with a knowing, amused smile, her chin resting on her hand. Her smile widened as she spoke, remarking that he was just as unique as she had heard. Tsubaki could only wonder what she meant by that. She then brought up her name, Weshi, explaining that people often ask how to write it. She clarified that it's written with the kanji for Hagoromo, a celestial robe, and Ishi, meaning stone. He listened, a bead of sweat on his brow, thinking to himself that it sounded like a name straight out of fairy tale. He supposed it fit her, his hand clenched into a fist under the table. He didn't think she was a bad person, but her relentless pace was proving difficult to follow. Just then, as if reading his thoughts, she leaned in with a soft smile and asked, "You're thinking that, aren't you?" She let out a small, amused puff of air, as if confirming her guess. Tsubaki stared back, startled and completely caught off guard by her perceptiveness. He stares, bewildered, as Weshi Keed giggles, confirming her guess was correct with a playful, cat-like expression. He tries to compose himself, taking a sip of his drink, and concluding she must just be teasing him. Flustered, he offers her a chance to ask him anything in return. Before she can respond, he looks at her earnestly and offers a simple, "In that case, thank you for before." Her expression softens into a bright, genuine smile. She observes that he's the type of person to offer thanks first, admitting that this quality has piqued her interest in him. The interaction leaves him deep in thought. He realizes she is far from unfocused. In fact, she's incredibly sharp. He decides it's time to press her for answers about her earlier statements. He poses a direct and startling question. Does she possess memories of events that differ from their current reality? His mind races. If Weshi knows about things that have changed, like the fact that Oda and Himawari only became a couple last week in this timeline, then his suspicion might be correct. The thought solidifies into a stunning possibility. Weshi Keed might be experiencing the very same time loop that has trapped him. He considers the implications. If she's trapped in the same loop, she must be struggling just as he is. A spark of hope ignites within him. If they pool their knowledge, they might find the clues they've been missing. Perhaps, he thinks, this time things could be different. Gathering his resolve, he voices his idea aloud, suggesting that together, the two of them might be able to find a way to escape the loop. In response to his proposal, she thoughtfully considered the idea. It wasn't a clear memory, she mused, but more of a faint, lingering feeling, a sense of déjà vu, as if something similar had happened before. He listened with a gentle smile as she tried to articulate her strange experience. Her explanation, however, seemed to catch him off guard, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. She clarified that her knowledge about Himawari and Oda wasn't a distinct memory either. It was just a strong gut feeling that they were already a couple. This meant she couldn't actually remember things with any certainty. She confirmed this with a slight smile, admitting that she had been treating all these strange premonitions as nothing more than feelings. He processed this new information. The vagueness of it all, he thought, was precisely what had made him so curious about her in the first place. A realization dawned on her. If Odokun only had vague memories of last week's events, then he must have approached her simply to confirm his own suspicions. A moment of silence settled between them in the quiet booth as they both contemplated the shared, yet distinct, nature of their predicament. He finally broke the silence with a quiet, "I see," his gaze lowered. She watched him waiting. Suddenly, she shot to her feet, the movement sharp and decisive. "Odokun," she began, her tone shifting. "Seeing your reaction just now?" She begins with a bright smile, explaining that she's starting to feel it too. With a knowing look, she suggests that he seems to understand more about this situation than he should. Tsubaki remains silent, his impassive face reflected in the glass before him. He realizes then that her experience is not the same as his. His silence prompts her to call out his name, asking if he's even listening. She concludes internally that he isn't the key to solving her problem, nor is he someone she can confide in. Despite this conclusion, as the school day continues, his name lingers in her thoughts. Later, she bounds up to a startled Tsubaki in the hallway, flashing a peace sign with a wide, confident grin. She cheerfully suggests they go for coffee again. As they walk, she explains her reasoning. Ever since that first time, he has been the one consistently seeking her out. She muses aloud, wondering if this means he's interested in her. He stops and clarifies that it's because there's no one else he can talk to about their shared predicament. He insists there's still things he needs to discuss with her. Her expression becomes serious. She is certain that he, of all people, will understand the vague, unsettling feeling she's experiencing. Her hand appears before his face, fingers held up, causing him to sweat nervously. With a triumphant grin, she latches onto his arm, pulling him forward. He can only react with flustered disbelief. She dragged him forcefully down the school corridor, ignoring his protests. He tried to reason with her, reminding her of what he'd already said, but she paid him no mind. They disappeared down the hall, leaving only the echo of their hurried departure. A moment of silence settled over the empty corridor. From a nearby classroom, however, Odokun and Himawari had watched the scene unfold. Himawari remarked on how unusual it was to see Tsubaki interacting with someone other than their group, while Odokun looked on with a concerned expression, a thought about the day's events crossing his mind. He stared after them, his brow furrowed with worry as a troubling thought began to form. Himawari, noticing his intense focus, called out his name in question. Weshi had led Tsubaki to a cafe. As they found a table, she prepared to explain the reason for her abrupt actions. She leaned forward, her expression a mix of curiosity and determination. She directly asked him to clarify what he meant earlier, when he'd claimed to remember events with greater clarity than she did. He considered her question, his gaze falling to the table. Even though she had asked, he wrestled with the thought of revealing the full truth. He questioned whether he should really tell her everything about the time loop. She, in turn, analyzed the situation from her side. She knew he only possessed a faint recollection of the previous week. Unaware of his thoughts, she concluded it felt too risky to reveal everything she knew to him just yet. He came to a similar conclusion. At least for now, he decided it would probably be best to conceal a part of his story. He sits across from Weshi Kid in the cafe, listening intently as she begins to explain her reason for seeking him out. She tells him that he might have the same kind of problem that she does. Before he can process her words, their conversation is shattered by an angry shout. Odokun storms towards their table, demanding to know exactly what Weshi meant by her statement. His sudden appearance startles Tsubaki, who can only stammer his friend's name in surprise. Oda, however, seems to barely notice him, his glare fixed entirely on Weshi as he questions why she is there. He then pivots his attention to Tsubaki, his tone dripping with accusation. He remarks on how the two of them are always together, even yesterday at lunch, before demanding to know what Tsubaki's true relationship with her is. Leaning in close, Oda cuts straight to his suspicion, bluntly asking if Tsubaki is dating Weshi. The directness of the question renders Tsubaki momentarily speechless. His hand trembles slightly as he struggles to continue, voicing a desperate fear that it couldn't possibly be true. The pained words finally escape him. He accuses Tsubaki of having already started to think of him as a nobody. The accusation hangs in the air, leaving Tsubaki looking up with an expression of pure, stunned confusion. He remains frozen in his seat, staring up at his distraught friend. A sudden wave of realization washes over Odokun. He flushes with embarrassment and quickly pivots, redirecting his initial angry question back toward Weshi in a flustered attempt to cover his outburst. He stammers, trying to justify his outburst. He reminds Tsubaki that they're childhood friends, questioning why Tsubaki would keep a problem to himself instead of confiding in his best friend. Tsubaki listens in silence, his expression unreadable. The three of them stand in a tense tableau, the weight of the unresolved confrontation hanging in the air. In the background, Himawari sits alone at a table, oblivious to the drama unfolding nearby. As Tsubaki watches his friend, a flicker of confusion crosses his face. For some reason, he can't quite grasp what's happening. Odokun turns away, his arms crossed defensively. He murmurs that he feels like something has just connected for him, or rather, that he's only just now realizing. His mind flashes back to a past conversation. He recalls explaining that all the strange loops they'd experienced and his hesitation about Tsubaki dating Himawari were all because he wanted the three of them to always be able to stay together. He had wondered aloud if that was the real reason for his feelings. Tsubaki now processes this memory, the pieces beginning to shift in his mind. Back in the present, Odokun's expression hardens with a pained resolve, as if steeling himself to say something difficult. He turns his head away, a deep blush spreading across his face as he struggles to articulate his feelings, finally managing to say, "It's because of Oda." The name hits Tsubaki with the force of a revelation. His eyes widen in shock as a thought crystallizes in his mind. Odokun's reaction. Could it be that he's the same as him? Sakura Hinata stands in the schoolyard, a look of dawning realization on his face. Though he'd had many thoughts, he finally grasps the truth. He's been endlessly repeating the same week. He wonders aloud if the other boy is looping as well. To confirm his suspicions, he decides to first speak with Tsubaki Eiga, who sits nearby with his head lowered. He begins with his frustration, complaining that no matter what he does, Tsubaki always seems to get in the way of him talking to Himawari. Tsubaki listens, his expression unreadable. Hinata then pauses, scratching his head as he tries to place the timeline. He wonders if his previous slip-up has even happened yet in this iteration. Tsubaki merely looks at him and murmurs a questioning him. Tsubaki looks up, his gaze direct. He asks if Hinata is talking about the loop, questioning if he has any doubts. He seems certain that Hinata wouldn't. Hinata's expression hardens with conviction. He states that just from the way Tsubaki is speaking, he can tell this is serious, and that settles it for him. Tsubaki looks down, his face shadowed as he quietly says Hinata's family name, Sakura. Before he can say more, Hinata slams his hand down with resolve, declaring that if this is truly the situation, then he grabs Tsubaki firmly by the shoulders, his voice softening with unexpected empathy. "Tsubaki," he says, "that must have been tough." Tsubaki's eyes widen in surprise. Still holding him, Hinata's tone shifts again, becoming a stern warning. He demands that Tsubaki never get close to him and Himawari again. He continued, admitting that despite his awareness of the loop, he had no idea about its mechanics or the conditions for escape. The only thing he had managed to figure out, he explained, was that Tsubaki was somehow involved. His hand tightened into a fist at his side. His expression hardened with resolve as he began to say, but in a sudden, forceful movement, he slammed Tsubaki against a nearby wall. His voice was filled with an unexpected desperation as he declared, "I want you to be happy." Tsubaki looked away, silently absorbing the weight of those words. He realized then that Hinata's feelings for him were not some fleeting, superficial crush. Hinata continued, his voice softer now. He confessed that while he felt bad for Himawari, Tsubaki would always be his #1 priority, and he wanted to be the same for Tsubaki. In a stark, abstract space, Hinata stood over the seated Tsubaki, explaining that it was Tsubaki who had guided him. Tsubaki could only acknowledge this fact, accepting that this was the role he played in Hinata's life. His frustration resurfaced with intensity. He insisted that unless something truly terrible were to happen, there was absolutely no way he would ever get together with Himawari. The declaration seemed to shatter something within Tsubaki. He looked down, whispering Hinata's name as the grim nature of the loop began to settle in his mind. His thoughts swirled into a vortex as a chilling possibility emerged. Was this loop happening because he himself was the one going around and around in circles? He stood alone on the school walkway, drenched by the relentless rain, the weight of his realization pressing down on him. He looked up at the gray sky, a single, chilling thought echoing in his mind. As long as his own heart remained unsettled, this cycle would never end. His contemplation was suddenly broken by a gasp. From a nearby doorway, Himawari emerged, her eyes wide with surprise at finding him there. She rushed to his side, her voice filled with concern as she called out his name. Tsukun. Her gaze dropped to his soaked shoes, standing in a puddle next to her dry rain boots. She questioned what was wrong, why he was standing there without an umbrella, getting so drenched. He could only manage a quiet, distant sound in response. He admitted that he had been so lost in his own swirling thoughts that he hadn't even realized it had begun to rain. With an exasperated sigh, she grabbed his arm, insisting that he couldn't just stand there or he would catch a cold. The sudden contact seemed to startle him out of his reverie. Her expression was a mixture of frustration and genuine, heartfelt worry for him. She resolved internally that she couldn't possibly leave him alone when he looked so troubled. As she began to lead him away, he started to speak her name. Without another word, she guided him toward a nearby building, reaching for the door to bring him in from the rain. Inside her home, Himawari looks out towards the entrance, remarking that it has been a long time since he last visited. He flinches as she places a dry towel over his soaked hair, letting out a small, surprised sound. She stretches and insists he take a shower first, promising to prepare some warm clothes for him while he does. He quietly agrees, offering a faint word of thanks. As he walks down the familiar hallway, he reflects on how, despite the time that has passed, he still knows the layout of her home instinctively. He opens the door and steps out, now changed into a set of dry, comfortable clothes. Emerging from the room, he finds Himawari in the kitchen, standing on a small stool. She turns with a cheerful smile and asks if he's done. She apologizes and asks him to wait just a little longer, explaining that the soup is almost ready. He agrees, acknowledging that he is imposing on her. He observes how well she is taking care of him, a comment that seems to fluster her. Pointing a ladle in his direction, she questions what he could possibly mean by that. She explains with intensity that she was extremely worried when she found him. Doing this much, she insists, is the only way she can put her own mind at ease. He looks at her, his expression softening with gratitude. He thanks her again, this time with genuine sincerity. He watched as her face broke into a radiant, blushing smile. It was clear she was overjoyed. She truly liked him. She turned back to the simmering pot on the stove, a gentle smile still on her face. He watched her, thinking that it was precisely because she was this kind of person, but still he hesitated. He finally voiced the question that was on his mind, asking if she wasn't bothered by being excluded from his conversation with Sakura. Himawari turned to him, her expression clear, and stated firmly that it didn't bother her at all. She leaned in slightly, her gaze meeting his. She called his name, reminding him that right now, he was here with her. Her name echoed in his thoughts as he looked at her. She turned back to the stove, a sense of resolve settling over her. This moment, right here, was real. As she tasted the dish, her thoughts focused on him. She knew his core was unshakable, shamelessly strong. That was the person he truly was. He clutched the fabric of his shirt, his heart aching. He realized that no matter what he did, he couldn't discard these feelings. Even knowing they might never be returned, he simply couldn't suppress his love for her. His intense introspection was broken as Himawari turned from the stove with a bright, cheerful smile, announcing that everything was ready. But as she moved, the leg of a nearby chair snapped with a sharp crack. Himawari cried out in surprise as she lost her balance and fell backward. Tsubaki instantly shouted her name, lunging to catch her. He caught her just in time, breaking her fall as they both landed on the floor. He held her securely from behind, his arms around her. Flustered and surprised, Himawari looked up towards him as he gazed down at her. She remains in his arms, her face flushed with embarrassment. She stammers a thank you to Tsukun for saving her from such a noisy fall. Looking up at him from their position on the floor, she softly calls his name, her expression a mixture of confusion and bashfulness. He gazes down at her, his expression serious. He tells her it's nothing, that he's just glad she's all right. Internally, he reflects that his body moved on its own for a girl like her. His words catch her completely off guard. With a sharp intake of breath, she stammers his name, her eyes wide with surprise and a deepening blush. Overwhelmed, she hides her face in her hands, telling him not to say such things with such a serious expression. She insists she can't even look at him. He watches her reaction, a faint blush appearing on his own cheeks as he realizes the impact of his words. Her ears are bright red, a clear sign of her profound embarrassment. She thinks to herself how mortifying the situation is. Seeing her state, Tsubaki gently asks if they can stay like this for just a little longer. Through her hands, Himawari manages to agree. She peeks at him, pleading with him not to look at her face. He closes his eyes, a soft smile on his lips, thinking to himself how unbelievably cute she is. His mind races with the realization that she would have this reaction to him, of all people. The feeling is overwhelming. He is simply too happy. His blissful moment is shattered when Sakura Hinata grabs him by the shoulder. Hinata declares with intensity that he is the one who wants to make her happy. The sudden declaration leaves him stunned, staring back momentarily speechless. His shock gives way to a quiet resolve as he closes his eyes, a decision forming in his mind. He opens them again, his gaze sharp and unwavering. The fleeting moment of vulnerability gone. His attention returns to the girl, still nestled against him. Himawari looks up, a hint of concern on her face, and quietly asks for Unspoken as he begins to speak. He looks down at her with a gentle smile, asking if she didn't want to see his face, or if there was some other reason she was hiding it. He then gently reaches out, his fingers brushing against her hair, causing her to let out a small, surprised gasp. Her cheeks flush a deep red as she averts her gaze, admitting that she was curious about the expression on her own face. She remains with her back slightly turned, a quiet vulnerability in her posture. For Tsubaki, a profound realization dawns. This is what it feels like to be with the girl he loves so dearly. This profound feeling strengthens his resolve, and his hand clenches into a tight, determined fist. He holds Himawari close, his mind set on a single, unwavering goal: to confess his feelings and make her face him directly. His attention fixates on the soft, affectionate gaze she directs outwards, a look not meant for him. A fierce determination hardens his expression. He silently vows that the gaze she reserves for Sakura will, one day, be directed only at him. Outside the school building, Tsubaki Eiga and Odokun stand apart in a quiet, paved area. The large windows of the school reflect the overcast sky behind them. Tsubaki confronts him directly, his expression unyielding. He tells Oda, whose face is a mask of troubled surprise, to confess his feelings to Himawari. Oda turns away, running a hand through his hair in frustration. He questions why Tsubaki is deliberately getting involved, insisting that he has his own way of handling things. Tsubaki's resolve is rooted in a simple desire. He wanted Oda to understand his principles. He then reveals his true motive, his gaze sharp and serious. For a certain reason, he explains, he must win against Oda in a matter concerning Himawari. This declaration infuriates Oda. He retorts that Tsubaki can't just unilaterally decide to start a competition. Since Tsubaki is so determined, Oda declares he will beat him, no matter what, the exact opposite of what Tsubaki intended. Oda cries out in frustration, clutching his head. In response, Tsubaki's hand tightens into a fist. He decides the finer details no longer matter. He closes the distance, grabbing Oda's wrist with a firm grip. His tone shifts unexpectedly as he tells Oda that if he has truly made up his mind, then he will simply support him. Oda looks away, a hint of a blush on his cheek, taken aback by the sudden change. He asks why Tsubaki has to be so formal and rigid about everything, suggesting it's unnecessary. His expression hardens with new resolve. He points a finger at Tsubaki, stating that Tsubaki is always the one to notice these things. Since he's now involved, Oda announces he will tell him something, leaving Tsubaki looking utterly perplexed. Before Oda could explain himself, Tsubaki cut in with a direct and startling question, asking if he was caught in a time loop. The question hung in the air, leaving Oda momentarily stunned and at a loss for words. His shock quickly gave way to a faint, knowing smile, a silent confirmation of Tsubaki's suspicion. As they walked together along the school building, the bell for the 5th period began to chime. Oda remarked that being able to redo things over and over felt like a cheat. He then stopped, turning to Tsubaki with a reassuring gesture. He told him not to worry, clapping his hands together and adding that it's perfectly fine to try and fail. As Oda walked away, Tsubaki considered his words, realizing that there were indeed advantages to his current predicament. He quietly voiced his gratitude to Oda. A new resolve settled over him. He understood now that there was no need to rush, that it was acceptable even if he were to fail. His gaze fell upon the school building as his mind raced. He decided that if he was going to formulate a plan, he would begin with the next opportunity. Later, Himawari found Tsubaki and noted that Oda had already left with his friends. Tsubaki agreed, adding that the two of them couldn't always be together, which seemed to sadden her. As they walked on, a change came over Himawari. Cat ears and a tail drooped from her form, betraying her dejection. She thought to herself that they would likely attend different high schools, and perhaps she needed to start getting used to being apart now. Her unusual features have vanished, but she remains flustered. Oda, observing her and Tsubaki, asks if the two of them have been fighting. She stammers, unable to form a coherent reply. She whirls around, lightly striking Tsubaki and calling him an idiot. He, in turn, offers a simple, smiling apology. His apology makes her blush, and she realizes this is a repeat of yesterday's events. Tsubaki watches her, noting to himself that the mood between them isn't unpleasant. He then asks if everything is all right. Looking away, she admits that she was worried about his reaction to her. Her concern gives him pause. He reflects internally that there is no reason for him to be hostile towards Oda. As he considers this, Himawari speaks his name, beginning to talk about what happened yesterday. He cuts her off, his expression hardening with resolve. He declares that with the ability to loop and try again, he won't be at a disadvantage. His intensity suddenly escalates. He grabs her by the shoulders, leaning in close and shouting her full name, Himawari Aoi. She gasps, completely taken aback by his sudden action. He holds her gaze, his own expression a mixture of fierce determination and a subtle blush. He remains silent, the unspoken weight of his next words hanging in the air. She stares back, her own face flushing as she waits, wide-eyed and speechless, for him to continue. She notices his expression is the same as it was the day before. Sukun, she begins, asking if something is wrong. He remains silent, his jaw tight. Flustered, she quickly retracts her concern, stammering that it's nothing. His grip on her shoulder suddenly tightens. He resolved that it doesn't matter if he gets hurt. He just has to go for it. He takes a sharp breath and shouts her name, Himawari. Tears welling in his eyes, his face contorted with emotion, he finally confesses the words he's held back for so long. I've always loved you. He presses on, his voice pleading, please go out with me. The request hangs in the air, leaving Himawari utterly stunned. Her eyes widen, reflecting the weight of his words as tears begin to form. A deep blush spreads across her face, her expression a mixture of shock and turmoil. He watches her, his own features now composed as he awaits her answer. A tense silence stretches between them. She struggles to process his sudden confession, her mind reeling from the shock. Finally, she bows her head, her voice trembling as she gives her answer, a heartfelt and painful apology. I'm sorry. She stands with her head bowed, unable to look at him as a heavy silence hangs between them on the quiet street. He looks at her, his expression clouded with confusion, and utters a single, questioning sound. In response, she squeezes her eyes shut, her face contorted in distress as she apologizes over and over. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She tries to explain, insisting that it's not because she dislikes him. But for him, the words are a confusing jumble. He had been told that she'd always liked him. His composure breaks. He steps forward, his voice rising with desperation, demanding to know why. Then why not? His hand clenches into a tight fist. This wasn't a calculated move, not some strategy for the next attempt. He was simply bewildered, unable to comprehend the situation. He presses on, his voice cracking with emotion, asking if it has to be Sakura. Why can't it be me? Her eyes widen, startled by the sudden mention of another's name. Her expression softens into one of dawning realization. A faint blush colors her cheeks as she finally seems to understand, whispering his name. Sukun. A memory surfaces, she and Sakura laughing together, while Tsubaki stands apart, isolated. She realizes with a pang of guilt that she was so wrapped up in her own world, she never noticed his feelings. Despite knowing him so well, she hadn't understood anything at all. Her voice cracks with anguish as she cries out that she can't forgive herself. With tears in her eyes, she insists that Tsubaki is not the one at fault. Her mind flashes back to their shared past, recalling that they were childhood friends who had always been together. A memory surfaces of them as small children, holding sunflowers under a summer sky. The weight of this history crashes down on her in the present. Tears stream down her face as she wails that she could never be his girlfriend, lamenting that she couldn't even face him properly. Overwhelmed, she blurts out that no matter what, she can't help but think this way. In the next instant, she spins around and flees, leaving a stunned Tsubaki reaching out behind her. She runs without looking back, her form shrinking as she puts distance between them, disappearing down the city street. He is left frozen in her wake, his expression a mask of pure shock. The full weight of the moment settles upon him. He internally acknowledges that it was a magnificent rejection, one that left him so stunned he was simply out of it for a while. But still, he slaps his own cheeks sharply, forcing himself to focus. He commands himself to get a grip and use this entire experience for the next time. He recalls that for the rest of the day, Himawari wouldn't even meet his gaze. A singular, determined thought crystallizes in his mind. If he can just loop back to the 7th day, he can change this. Later that evening, in the quiet of his room, an alarm beeps on his phone. He gazes at the screen, a weary but resolute expression settling on his face. He lay in bed, phone in hand, a faint smile on his lips. He reflected on how he used to dread this particular morning, but now, he had finally returned. This time, he would face Himawari again. His phone chimed softly. His thoughts were cut short as he turned, his eyes widening in surprise. Someone was beside him in bed. A confused sound escaped his lips. Following his gaze, he saw a delicate hand resting gently upon his own. The phone screen glowed, displaying the date. Wednesday, May 14th, 7 a.m. The background was a cherished photograph from their childhood. He, Himawari, and Chisato, all dressed in kimonos for a summer festival. The date struck him with the force of a physical blow. A single, frantic thought raced through his mind. He hadn't returned to May 7th. Had he somehow broken free from the loop? Tsubaki Eiga walks away from an apartment building, a somber look on his face as he heads out for the day. He enters the building, the door closing behind him, leaving the quiet residential street behind. He lets out a weary sigh, his thoughts heavy. He had wished for so long to finally escape this loop. The thought brings back a painful memory. Himawari, tears streaming down her face, apologizing over and over. A phone screen marks the time and date, May 14th, 7 a.m. He reflects on how this is the state he's found himself in. As he walks, He realizes that it's difficult to face Himawari. He reasons that at this hour, it should be fine, but his thought is cut short by a sudden sight. His eyes widen in shock. Standing before him is Himawari, her own expression a mirror of startled surprise. Overwhelmed, she blurts out a hasty apology and sprints past him, leaving him standing alone in her wake. He remains frozen for a moment, a look of dismay on his face. It appears they are heading in the same direction. His hand tightens slightly at his side as he grapples with uncertainty. What is he supposed to do now? Reaching his classroom, 3A, he slides the door open and calls out for Sakura. He is met by Odokun, who informs him that if he's looking for Sakura, he isn't there at the moment. Tsubaki can only offer a quiet word of thanks in response. He had visited Sakura several times after that, but his friend was always gone. He felt that Sakura had heard about the outcome of his confession from someone and was now deliberately avoiding him. He had wanted to talk about it, but only with Sakura, no one else. His thoughts were interrupted as he found himself walking down a familiar hallway. He recognized it instantly. This was classroom 3B. Turning to the two girls beside him, he apologized, explaining that he was trying not to be seen by Himawari. He then made a request, asking if they could call someone named Weshi-san for him. The girl in question, Weshi-kid, was with her friends, suggesting they get tea again. She remarked that Iga-kun seemed to remember things more clearly now, a development that contradicted the current reality. A name flashed through Tsubaki's mind, Katie. As she was talking, one of the students Tsubaki had spoken to approached her. The student relayed that Weshi-san was being called for. Weshi's expression shifted to one of surprise as she heard who was asking for her. Iga-kun, she faced Tsubaki directly, acknowledging him as Sakura's childhood friend. She then reminded him that they had gone for tea together several times in the past. Her expression turned inquisitive. With a finger to her lip, she asked him a pointed question. Isn't this the first time we've ever spoken? Tsubaki remained silent, his face a mask of confusion. He stood frozen, his mind racing to comprehend her words. The timeline was supposed to be continuous, yet her statement shattered that understanding. He wondered what she could possibly mean. Before he could voice his confusion, she cheerfully asked if she could return to her lunch. With a small, almost teasing smile, she apologized for the interruption. His thoughts spiraled into turmoil. Why was this happening? How had things gone so wrong? A new, unsettling possibility entered his mind. Could Weshi be experiencing a different loop entirely? He shook his head, trying to push the thought away, deciding that her situation wasn't his immediate concern. His mind drifted back to the core of his problem. He recalled the moment clearly. In this very timeline, he had confessed his feelings to Himawari, only to be turned down. The realization left him feeling utterly alone, isolated in a spotlight of his own failure. He understood that if things continued this way, the situation would become dire. Compounding his despair was the memory of Sakura and a downcast Himawari. He knew that even his academic future was on the verge of collapsing. In his current state, everything felt hopeless, and beneath it all was a raw, undeniable truth. He still hadn't truly come to terms with Himawari's rejection. A surge of desperate energy propelled him forward. He broke into a sprint down the hallway, a single thought consuming him. He had to run, even if it meant shattering the loop itself. He shouted his resolve into the empty hall, vowing to try again and again, no matter how many attempts it took to finally break through. He sprinted down the sunlit school corridor, a singular, desperate purpose driving him forward. His determined search led him outside the school building, where he finally found Himawari waiting. He called out her name, his voice filled with urgency. With tears welling in her eyes, Himawari could only stammer repeated apologies, her hands clasped anxiously. Later, at a park, the conversation continued. Himawari, her expression pained, told him that it was pointless, no matter how many times he confessed his feelings to her. His composure broke as he pleaded, "Why can't it be me?" He lamented that by clinging to his feelings, he had only made himself more pathetic. Tears streamed down her face as she turned away, insisting through sobs. That's not it. That's not it at all. Her profound distress forced a painful realization upon him. He was the one causing her suffering. He had no choice but to understand. Nearby, Himawari covered her face, overwhelmed by tears. The weight of this final rejection followed him back to the classroom. He sat silently at his desk, enveloped in a palpable aura of despair, which did not go unnoticed by a concerned, glasses-wearing classmate. That classmate, along with Sakura, approached his desk. "Hey, Eiga, what's wrong?" one asked. Tsubaki stared blankly, stating it was nothing. He felt he had no hope left to show anyone, that he was just being relentlessly cornered day after day. His hand trembled on the desk as a bleak realization consumed him. Continuing to live in this world was hell. But returning to the loop was also hell. Whichever path he chose, it was damnation. He finds himself back in the loop once more, a single tear marking his cheek. A grim thought offers a sliver of comfort. Returning to the seventh day is, at least, an improvement. A faint, determined smile touches his lips as he realizes the silver lining. By returning to this point in time, the painful fact of his confession to Himawari has been erased from reality. Walking through the school corridor, his mind fixates on a single problem. If he is to go back, how does he do it? His gaze lands on Himawari and her friend walking ahead, reinforcing his desperate need for an answer. He heads up a flight of stairs, concluding that with the mechanism of the loop still unknown, he has no choice but to resort to experimentation once again. His thoughts drift to stories involving time and space. While dramatic accidents are one way, he reasons that a strong physical impact is the most common trigger. This grim logic leads him to the school rooftop. He climbs onto the railing of the safety fence, acknowledging that fear was the only thing that had stopped him from trying this before. Far below, another student walks across the grounds unaware. His face twists with anguish. He tells himself he's past the point of being scared, but at that very moment, his shoe begins to slip on a narrow beam. A single, desperate plea escapes him. His foot loses its grip entirely, tipping him over the edge. He plummets toward the ground below. From the courtyard, Keyed Weshi looks up, her expression frozen in sheer horror as she witnesses his fall. He plummets from the sky, his desperate leap ending not on hard concrete, but in the dense foliage of a large bush. The impact cracks branches around him as he lands with a pained groan. On the school grounds below, Keyed Weshi and her friends, including the dark-haired girl, stop dead in their tracks, staring in utter shock at the boy who just fell from the roof. Panic erupts among the students. One cries out, questioning if he really just jumped, while another screams for someone to get a teacher immediately. The result of his gamble is not a reset of time. Instead, he finds himself sitting up in a bed, attended by his mother and another woman. His actions didn't turn back the clock. They only caused a massive commotion. His mother weeps with relief, thankful that he only sustained minor injuries. The other woman, a teacher, explains that she gave him a thorough scolding. For Tsubaki, it was all for nothing. Time continued to move forward. A week later, on the evening of May 20th, he sits in his room, staring blankly at his phone. He reflects on all the things he tried, how they all ended in failure. He wonders if there's nothing left to do but give up. His phone's wallpaper, a photo of him and his friends smiling together, stares back at him. The thought is crushing. He has to accept everything and just keep living in this timeline. The device slips from his hand, landing softly on his bed. A moment passes before he slowly reaches down to pick it up again. He refuses to accept it. But as he sits on the edge of his bed, the truth settles in. Tears begin to stream down his face. He has no other choice but to brace himself for what's to come. Under the light of the full moon, he sobs. He wonders why this is happening to him, what he's supposed to do or say. But it doesn't matter. Tomorrow is coming. A sharp, repetitive beep of his phone's alarm pierces the morning quiet. Sunlight streams into his room. A new day has begun, whether he is ready for it or not. He stared at his phone, a wave of confusion washing over him. A single, bewildered sound escaped his lips. On the screen was a photograph from his childhood. It showed him as a young boy, standing beside a smiling Himawari and another girl with a cat ear-like hair accessory, all dressed in summer kimonos. Overlaid on the nostalgic image was the current date and time. May 14th, 7 a.m. The impossible truth crashed down on him. He had looped again. Against all odds, he was back on this day. In the quiet of his room, Tsubaki Eiga sits on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone. His gaze falls upon the screen, which displays the date. May 14th, 7 a.m. The wallpaper, a photo from the festival, serves as a painful reminder. He had confessed to Himawari. He had escaped the loop, or so he thought. The horrifying realization crashes down on him. The loop had started all over again. He springs to his feet in a fury of disbelief. Why? He shouts into the empty room, knowing that getting angry is utterly useless. Clutching his phone, his face contorted with desperation, he commands himself, "Think, Tsubaki Eiga." His thoughts race in a panic. He has no idea what has happened, or what he should even do first. Later, at school, he stands alone against a wall when Hinata, Sakura, spots him from a distance and raises a hand in greeting. As Hinata approaches, Tsubaki realizes this is already different from the previous week's loop, where he hadn't interacted with Hinata at all. He decides he must do something different this time, and that it has to start with Hinata. The other boy's expression is laced with concern. He notes that Tsubaki seems down and asks if something's wrong. Hinata calls out to him, starting to say Sakura before correcting himself. Oh no. Tsubaki, he begins, his gaze intense. He stood beside Tsubaki, questioning why he'd been called out like this, noting it was out of character. Tsubaki remained silent, a look of uncertainty on his face. He broke the silence, grabbing Tsubaki's shoulder with an intense expression. He demanded to know if Tsubaki had confessed to Himawari and if he was going to spend time with her now. Tsubaki, caught off guard, cried out for him to wait. He blurted out the truth. He had been rejected. The declaration left Hinata speechless, his eyes widening in disbelief. His shock gave way to incredulity as he questioned if it was true. Tsubaki, with his head lowered, clarified that it wasn't a simple rejection. He had thought they were getting along well. He then posed a strange question, asking if it was acceptable for anyone other than Tsubaki to confess to Himawari. He replied that for that very reason, he wouldn't interfere. His mind drifted back to the previous week, remembering the sight of Hinata and Himawari together. He concluded internally that Hinata's opinion of him was far too high. The thought was interrupted as Hinata called out to him, trying to get his attention. He grabbed Tsubaki again, his face flushed with agitation. He insisted that Himawari was just acting strangely and that he would go talk some sense into her, pleading with Tsubaki to just wait. He reached out, his hand closing around Hinata's arm to stop him from leaving. Startled, Hinata shouted that he couldn't understand why Himawari would reject someone like Tsubaki. Tsubaki quietly spoke his name. He looked back, his expression softening. Tsubaki decided to seize the moment, asking if Hinata had known the truth from the very beginning. He looks back at Tsubaki, his expression serious. Tsubaki continues his questioning, asking why a good guy like Hinata would ever acknowledge someone like him, who has nothing to offer. In response, Hinata simply exhales, a sound of frustration escaping him. Tsubaki, now standing further away, retorts that Hinata is the one who doesn't understand himself at all. His words strike a nerve. Hinata whirls around, his voice ringing with conviction as he declares that Tsubaki is the very reason he has become the person he is now. Tsubaki is taken aback, his mind struggling to process the statement. Hinata begins to explain, recalling his childhood. He was the smallest, a crybaby who was terrible at both sports and academics. A memory surfaces, a young Tsubaki finding him, offering encouragement and patiently teaching him everything he needed to know. Hearing this, Tsubaki looks down thoughtfully. He concedes that, now that it's been brought up, he supposes he was vaguely aware of having done those things. Hinata presses on, explaining that he always saw the potential in Tsubaki, the makings of a man who could excel in both his studies and physical pursuits, someone truly befitting of his kind nature. He admits that he genuinely understood why Himawari was drawn to Tsubaki. But then he poses a critical question. From his point of view, the person she was drawn to, the person he became, was entirely a product of Tsubaki's influence. The memory shifts again, showing the two boys playing while young Himawari watched them from a distance. His gaze intensifies as he states that this is the one thing Himawari doesn't understand. The weight of the revelation leaves Tsubaki speechless. With a sharp gesture, Hinata points directly at him, his voice filled with frustration. He declares that Tsubaki doesn't understand either. Tsubaki's gaze remained fixed, his mind reeling from the confrontation. The name Sada was the only thought that surfaced as he stood beneath the night sky. The next morning, Himawari lay in bed, letting out a weary sigh. Her friend, Kid Weshi, greeted her with boundless energy, pulling back the covers. She noticed Himawari's gloomy expression and quickly tried to cheer her up, pointing out that while she might seem down, it was different for her. She wasn't in a loving relationship with her boyfriend. Later, at school, Kid boldly approached Tsubaki by the lockers, calling out his nickname. Himawari trailed behind, a thought echoing in her mind. Tsubaki was there for her. Turning to Himawari with a knowing smile, she asked if she knew about Tsurugi. Before Himawari could answer, Kid declared that Tsurugi was their cupid. The statement struck Himawari with the force of a physical blow. She questioned everything, realizing with dawning horror that her memories of Chisato's boyfriend, Tsurugi, were completely wrong. Outside classroom 3B, an unexpected reply from Kid left a question hanging in the air. The question came from Himawari, who, with a blush dusting her cheeks, looked between the curtains at Kid Weshi. She asked if Kid was referring to Odokun as her boyfriend. She was met with a direct question from Kid, who asked if that wasn't the case. Himawari, still flustered, could only stammer that she thought that's what she had heard. Kid turned away, touching her chin thoughtfully. She denied it, stating that wasn't what she was talking about at all and that it felt like Himawari was lying. Her words left Himawari stammering in the hallway, unable to form a coherent response as Kid sharply snapped a hair tie. Gathering her composure, she clutched her uniform and insisted, asking Kid to tell her more about that story in detail. The conversation paused, shifting to a moment outdoors where Himawari sat on a bench next to the small, cat-eared girl. As the girl made a playful sound, Himawari began to speak about her current feelings. But back in the hallway, the conversation with Kid continued. Kid puffed her cheeks in frustration, concluding that her own memory must be wrong and this was a different matter entirely. Himawari looked down in shame, admitting she was too embarrassed to face Odokun. She was suddenly startled as Kid leaned in extremely close. Kid explained that she was only asking for an outside opinion, questioning why Chisato would need to be concerned. She elaborated, stating that from what she'd heard, Chisato had been watching Tsubaki Eiga, not the person he had guided. The memory of a young, confident Tsubaki with a soccer ball flashed through Himawari's mind, leaving her utterly speechless. She looks down, a single leaf drifting past as she murmurs to herself, try to make sense of it all. So in the end, her thoughts are interrupted by Kid Weshi, who stands before her with a firm expression. Kid states that if Himawari was only ever going to watch Tsubaki Eiga from afar, then she shouldn't have done anything at all, adding that Tsurugi has now moved on because of it. With a dismissive sound, Kid turns and plops down on a nearby bench, crossing her arms with a frustrated sigh. Himawari can only watch, taken aback by the sudden confrontation. Meanwhile, Tsubaki Eiga sits alone against the wall of the school building, letting out a quiet sigh as other students run past in the distance. He recalls a conversation with Sakura Hinata, who had once called him arrogant and said he couldn't be rated highly. Tsubaki reflects on this, realizing he'd never considered things that way before, and now wonders if there's a possibility for him to become something more. His contemplation is broken by a sudden cry of pain. He looks up, startled, to see a girl stumbling right in front of him. She quickly recovers, planting her hands on her hips and looking down at him with a confident smile. She introduces herself as Weshi Kid and asks if he knows her. Tsubaki, still seated, can only repeat her name in confusion. Kid presses on, stating that it's not fair that she knows who he is, but he doesn't know her. She begins to walk past him, musing aloud that he doesn't seem like the type to pay attention to girls outside of his own class. She asks what that's all about, then cheekily declares that this is her line to say. He watches her go, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Her voice continues, pointing out that while this is their first meeting, his attitude makes it seem as though he's known her all along. She suddenly stops and leans down close to him, a sly smile playing on her lips. She tells him that he'll have to return the favor now, addressing herself as Weshi, Keed-chan. Tsubaki can only ask what she means by that. He stares, wide-eyed and blushing, as Keed Weshi whispers his name, her face just inches from his. She pulls back just enough to meet his gaze, a playful smirk on her lips. There's something going on, isn't there? She asks, her tone confident. He looks away, unable to answer. Keed continues, her expression turning thoughtful. She observes that he seems different from other people, then wonders aloud if perhaps she is standing a bit too close. Settling on the ground beside him, she crosses her arms and elaborates. She explains that she's heard many things from Chisato and has a general understanding, but she senses that the current situation is different. Leaning forward with a wide, eager smile, she admits that despite this, she felt a sense of unease that drew her in. In a sudden move, she lunges forward, pushing him back onto the ground. Leaning over him, her face close to his once more, she declares her interest in him. Aga-kun, she whispers. If you're willing, tell me everything. His mind reels, a deep blush spreading across his face. He can't comprehend what is happening to him. Looking down at him, her expression is a mix of playful curiosity and intensity. What is it that's happening between you and me? She asks softly. Outside, the school building stands silent under a partly cloudy sky. Back with the two students, Keed's eyes widen in sudden realization. A loop, she breathes. Tsubaki, his expression still dazed, quietly confirms it. She kneels opposite him, the weight of his confession hanging in the air. He finally clarifies the situation, stating that they are both repeating a specific period of time. He immediately corrects her assumption, saying that's not quite right. With a knowing look, she explains that unlike him, who retains memories from the previous week, her own recollections are vague. As she playfully leans against him, kicking a leg up, he continues his analysis. For what he can gather, it seems his loop and hers have different cycle lengths. She beams, cheerfully admitting that she had been playing dumb with him, starting with 0 memories. Internally, she compliments his quick understanding and flexible thinking. She muses that it might have been better if she had explained everything properly during the very first week. She then questions him, asking if this is the first time he's ever discussed the loop with anyone. The realization strikes him. If her loop cycle is different, it means that for her, the week he remembers never even happened. The thought renders his own experiences meaningless. Seeing his expression shift, she lets out a confused sound. She pulls her knees to her chest, her expression softening with empathy. She states gently that he has been suffering through this all by himself for a long time. He admits that he tried to confide in Asaka about the loop during a previous week, but it was no use, as Tsurugi isn't looping. She listens, simply affirming his words. Her face suddenly lights up with a brilliant, joyous expression. She exclaims with delight that if that's the case, then it's just her who shares this experience with him. In her excitement, she reaches out and takes his hand. She tells him she understands how he feels, but then quickly pulls back with a slight apology, leaving him momentarily stunned. Her fingers gently touched his, a soft, deliberate connection between them. Looking up at him with tears of joy welling in her eyes, she declared that she was his one and only loop companion. He could only stare back, a blush spreading across his face, completely taken aback by her sudden, heartfelt declaration. As they sat together, she began to explain that she had been trying all sorts of things to escape the loop. To prove her point, she revealed a specific memory. She remembered when Tsurugi and Chisato started dating, a detail that clearly surprised him. His gaze fell to the ground as he processed her words. He quietly asked if it had been difficult for her, his thoughts turning to their shared burden. He then looked at her with a newfound understanding, a small smile on his lips. He realized he shouldn't have underestimated her. She wore the same determined expression he did. She was truly his companion. Sensing his change in demeanor, she squeezed his hand tighter. With an earnest expression, she reminded him that there's a limit to what a person can accomplish on their own, her words causing him to flush once more. She continued, her voice filled with conviction. She admitted that since her memories don't reset, her experience hasn't been as harsh as his, but she passionately declared her desire for them to escape the loop together. Her proposal left him utterly stunned. The weight of her words hung in the air. He stammered, realizing she was proposing they cooperate, and she cheerfully confirmed it. And with that understanding reached, she suddenly wrapped her arms around him, pulling him into a tight embrace. Still holding him close after their hug, she looks up with a playful smile and makes a startling proposition, that they should start dating. He stares back, his face flushing a deep red, completely taken aback by her words. He can only manage a stammered question in response. His mind reels, a chaotic jumble of thoughts overwhelming him. He recognizes the look on his own face as one of genuine, profound confusion. Now sitting together by the school building, she calmly lays out her understanding of the situation. She states that his goal is to return to the time before Chisato rejected his confession, and he quietly confirms her assessment. Leaning in close, she gently touches his chin and repeats her proposal with a confident smile. Stunned, He questions why that would be the solution. She pulls back, explaining her logic. Since they don't know the conditions that trigger or break the loop, their best course of action is to do something completely different from any previous iteration. She asks if her reasoning is flawed, but the suggestion seems to wound him, his composure cracking. She presses on, insisting her logic is sound. Before he can fully process it, she declares the matter settled, anointing him as her new boyfriend and telling him to wait. She kneels before him, a hint of vulnerability in her voice as she asks if she isn't a suitable partner. She muses that she always considered herself cute and well-developed, assuming she would be popular. Her directness leaves him blushing and speechless. His continued silence seems to disappoint her, and her confident expression fades slightly as she murmurs her understanding. Seeing her disappointment, he quickly backpedals, waving his hands in denial. He frantically explains that it's not what she thinks, that he feels he isn't worthy of her because she's not just anyone, but someone special to Odokun. As he hesitated, Keed leaned forward with a confident smile, pressing him for a decision. "Well then, what's it going to be?" she asked, while he could only stammer in response. He looked down, his face flushed, admitting to himself that he found Weshi-san to be a very attractive girl. Despite this, he reasoned that someone like him was no match for a girl like her. His formal way of speaking amused Keed, who let out a small laugh at his politeness. Her laughter subsided into a bright, open expression as she spread her arms wide. She declared that she had never met anyone quite like him before. As they walked under the evening sky, she continued, explaining that she was usually quite sharp and that Odokun's mind seemed to work at the same speed as hers. Tsubaki could only offer a non-committal agreement. She then told him that just knowing he was her ally was enough to make her incredibly happy. Turning to face him with a dazzling, blush-tinged smile, she exclaimed that it was more than enough to make her fall for him completely. The declaration struck Tsubaki with the force of a physical blow, leaving him wide-eyed and stunned. His face burned red. He had never been praised so directly before, and the unexpected joy made his heart pound in his chest. Seeing his reaction, Keed's expression softened into a gentle, encouraging smile. "So, why don't we at least give it a try?" she proposed. Before he could answer, she grabbed his hand, pulling him forward with a burst of energy. She reasoned that if they didn't make a move, nothing would ever change. With a triumphant grin, she declared, "It's decided." She cheerfully formalizes their agreement, bowing to Tsubaki and declaring that they should get along well, starting from today. Still flustered, he bows in return, stammering his thanks and agreement. The formality lasts only a moment before she decisively takes his arm in a firm grip. With his arm linked in hers, she joyfully announces the official start of their dating. Tsubaki, completely caught off guard, can only stammer in protest as she begins to lead him away. Unseen by them, Himawari watches from behind a corner. She stands frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief as she tries to process the scene. As they walk on, Keed explains to the still-dazed Tsubaki that since she was the one who rejected his confession, she really has no right to say who he can or cannot date. Alone now, Himawari clutches at her chest, wondering why it hurts so much, why she feels this sudden, suffocating unease. Her expression crumbles, tears welling in her eyes as a profound sadness washes over her. The scene flashes abruptly to the sterile interior of a room, wherein Bag hangs silently. Just as quickly, the focus returns to Himawari, whose brow is furrowed in confusion. A soft, questioning sound escapes her lips. Her gaze follows the distant figures of Tsubaki and Keed walking away under the evening sky. Suddenly, she gasps, her eyes widening in dawning horror as a terrible understanding seems to crash down upon her. She stands frozen on the grassy slope, leaves scattering in the wind around her. Clutching her uniform, she wonders aloud, "What was that just now?" It is a clear sign. An anomaly has appeared, not just in the world, but within Himawari's own memories.